back to the BAT podcast. I'm Howard Swig, and I'm here today with Kevin Callahan, owner of Devin Sports Cars. Super excited to chat with Kevin today about the history of the Devin brand and what he's doing with it today. Kevin, welcome.
Welcome, Howard. Big fan of your podcast. I got to ask you a question up front. When it starts, there's three hits of a hammer. Is that supposed to be the gavel at an auction?
I believe that's right. You know, we designed a little lead in there, and that's what that's supposed to be.
Why is it always three?
You know what? I wish I could tell you more. I wasn't the guy that came up with it, but hey, we're always open to suggestions.
Let's get going. All right, Howard.
Well, Devin has, I think our community will be super interested in this conversation. Devin has a very, very cool and rich history. I love it because it kind of starts in my favorite era of really West Coast motorsports in the 50s and 60s. Bill Devin was, you know, one of the movers and shakers that was around then. If I'm not mistaken, he got his start racing Crosley Hot Shot in the late 40s and early 50s. Was kind of, I think you would know more about this than me, into the slow momentum, small displacement cars, which kind of where he got his start. Tell us a little bit about kind of the origins of Devin and Bill Devin's career and how it all got started.
Yeah, and you go back to his roots. His dad was a car guy. His dad had a small car dealership. And Bill Devin, through that time, he actually had three car dealerships, which he had bought and sold, and he was very big into cars. And that actually gave him the finance, the resources to go racing. So he was a race car driver at first. He was good, but he wasn't really that good. So it made sense that he started with the smaller cars. And that hot shot he ran, he actually won his first race and won a couple races in that. So that's where, and it's an important story, and will come up. That's where the DNA of Devin comes from. Bill Devin was a race car driver. He was a race car builder, and that's how these cars came about.
I think a lot of people think of Devin and they think specifically that they primarily were a builder of aftermarket fiberglass bodies that could be customized and applied to a variety of chassis and cars of the day. And that was true at the beginning. I know you guys are doing today a really interesting project, kind of reincarnating the Devin SS, which was kind of the top car that they built. I think before that, they'd started kind of more H modified stuff, or maybe after. I know that the Devin C and Devin D were kind of more affordable versions that people could drive on the street and also take racing. Is that accurate that they were primarily a fiberglass body builder? Tell us about that and about the Devin SS originally and kind of what you're doing with that today.
Yeah, so we'll start out with that. There's two Bill Devin stories, kind of. There is the Bill Devin who made fiberglass bodies that were used to fit onto sports cars that got an off. Maybe you wrecked your MG or Triumph, you could put a fiberglass lightweight body on it. So that is one of the Bill Devin stories, how he made these fiberglass bodies. Those who follow Devin, they're called 295 bodies because they were able to be purchased for $295. And what you got for $295 is you got a body, doors, a hood, and a trunk, and you could add certain items if you wanted to. They were first originally available in 12 different sizes, but they went on to 27 different sizes. So you could actually buy this Devin body, and you could buy different size doors and different size, basically a couple front ends, and you can make that space between the door jambs larger, wider. You could spread the body away a little bit wider. So he was the first fiberglass guy who actually made a car body available for a lot of different size cars. And there was a time he was the leading manufacturer of fiberglass bodies in the world. So we go from that story where Bill Devin was making these fiberglass bodies to Bill Devin, the car manufacturer. So that is a whole story. And we'll start with the Devin SS here. The Devin SS came about because he wanted to go racing. He wanted to build his own car. And one day he got a letter from two guys in Northern Ireland, Nolan Hillis and Malcolm McGregor, that they had designed this sophisticated for the time sports car body, frame, chassis, and they wanted a body for it. Well, Bill Devin was so impressed by this chassis design, he flew to Northern Ireland. And when he got there, they took the car to an old abandoned race airfield. They strapped a milk crate onto the chassis, and Bill Devin drove it around for a while. And right then, he knew that this was something special and something he wanted to be a part of. So he made a deal with the two Irishmen that he would import these chassis to the United States. Bill Devin would then fit them with his body and also his engine. We haven't talked about that, but we all heard the Shelby story. In America, Detroit could provide engines, and you could not get engines like we could here in the United States back in the late 50s and 60s. But in Detroit, they would sell you, Ford would sell you engines, and Bill Devin partnered up with Corvette. So he had access to 283 engines that could be fitted into this chassis. So what he ended up with the Devin SS was a very sophisticated car for its time. We're talking four-wheel independent suspension all around, um, disc brakes on all four corners. He had an independent rear and a Dion tube in the back. They had the first version, you would say, of coil-over shocks. Nolan Hillis was a big motorcycle guy, so they had these big shocks in the back with coils and shock absorbers that allowed you to adjust. So he had a very sophisticated chassis, a lightweight body, and a real good horsepower motor, which he could get up to over 350 horsepower if he wanted to. So that's the story about the Devon SS. If you like, I can go on about the C's and D's, but I've done a lot of talking here. So
And it's interesting, and in the context of the period, there was a lot of that collaboration going on, really, all over the U.S. and Europe with chassis manufacturers and engine builders. I mean, you think of stuff like Lister using Chevy and Corvette engines, even stuff like Arnold Bristol's. Obviously, the Cobra is a well-known story there. So what Bill Devin was doing was really symptomatic of kind of the innovation and connections that racers primarily were making all over the globe, and combining their efforts to build what they thought was the latest and greatest, and a car that could ultimately win races.
that's true. And the UK had ability to supply Girlin brakes, disc brakes. They had the ability for special shock absorbers. That Lister you talked about shares a lot of common features with the Devon SS body, and the fact that they were experimenting with inboard disc brakes, getting that unsprung weight from the wheels back inside. All those things were happening in Europe, and Bill Devin took advantage of it, and so did Shelby by bringing in the AC Cobra. There's a lot on the Cobra that was not, available here in the United States. So that way, they were able to take the world and make a world-class sports car out of it.
And on that note, tell us. I mean, they succeeded in doing just that, and they raced the car all over with real success. So tell us about some of the what would have been a competitor to the Devon SS in the late 50s and early 60s, and a little bit about what they were able to achieve on track.
I'm going to back up a little bit with the story, and I'll go back to that. But the Panhard was the first car that Bill Devin won a national championship with in 1956. He bought a Panhard dealership in about 54, and that's where he started making fiberglass bodies. He made his first fiberglass bodies. It was the wonder product of the late 50s. People didn't know about it. Corvette, we hear in 53, had the body. But so Bill Devin made this lightweight, very cool looking fiberglass body for the Panhard. And Jimmy Orr won a national championship with that in the under 1500cc class in 1956. So that was the first taste Bill Devin had of building a national championship sports car. The Devin SS, which we were talking about before, I'll jump on that again. You go back to Riverside in 1959, and the field would have bird cages in it. It would have Jaguars, Maseratis, 450s, all the 300s at that time. All the best race cars in the world were racing against Devons in that late 50s and onto the 60s. So it was definitely a world championship sports car, and we hope to continue to prove that as we go forward.
And we have on Bring a Trailer listed a couple kind of SS bodied race cars, but more than a few Devon C's, Devon D's, the later cars, often with Volkswagen power, but in or around that period, there were Triumph powered Devons. If you could touch on kind of the other Devon models that were around then and that maybe you're bringing back to life today, that'd be great.
Yeah, a good comment there. You mentioned listeners at home. You're probably wondering, what's a Devon look like? Well, it kind of looks like the SS, looks like a Maserati 300, 450, or DB1 Aston Martin. But go to the website. They do a great job of archiving all the cars that have gone through there and sold. You can get a feel for what they're worth and what they look like. And the photo galleries of these cars give you a great insight on how the interiors went together and everything else. So the cars that I mentioned, the 295 bodies, they could be fitted onto various frames. Now, one of them in particular was a very cool car. It was over here in Pennsylvania, it was in Lancaster, and a gentleman in California bought it. But that's what we call, and Bill Devin named them by letters. So it was a 295K body, and the K, if you look it up, stood for a certain wheelbase and length. But that was put on a Volkswagen Pan, had a Volkswagen engine in it, and fall under the category of specials. Now I'm going to talk about specials a little bit. You'll see Devon's advertised as specials. So a guy could have bought a Devon body and put his own drivetrain in it, his own frame underneath it, his own motors. So they fall into a category of specials. And one of the more specials was Ack Miller. He won Pikes Peak 6 times in the late 50s and 60s in a Devon, what they call special. Now his car was fitted with a Ford motor. So there's a lot of specials out there who are very, even though they weren't factory cars, they have a great racing provenance and are very interesting to collectors. So we have the Devon specials, we have the Devon SSs. Devon SS sold for more than he thought. When he first went to market with the Devon SS, he thought he could sell for $5,600. The reality of it was closer to $10,000. He had to sell it to make a profit. Realized this was probably too expensive for what he wanted to do, sell an American-made sports car. And that's when he came up with the Devon D. Now the D stands for Dorchester, basically German. And Bill Devin had a source to actually buy Porsche motors. It turned out the industrial sales arm of Porsche's was actually an avenue you could buy motors. And people would buy motors for farmers would buy them for irrigation pumps in the field. Amusement park guys would run them to run their amusement park. It makes sense. You have a little air-cooled motor over here turning a Ferris wheel. Bill Devin started buying these motors and putting them into these Devon Ds. Lighter weight than the Speedster, very Speedster looking, and more successful than a lot of Speedsters. Porsche found out about this and said, no more. Cut off his access to buying Porsche motors. Bill Devin's timing was pretty good because it was about 1961 and the Corvair came out. And the Corvair was a rear engine GM made motor. And then he switched his production to basically putting Corvair motors, and they were called Devon Cs or Devon Corvairs. So we had the SS, Devon D, and Devon C. And at this time, I have to mention that the Devon C could be fitted with a Volkswagen motor too. So the Devon D could have a Volkswagen motor. So we had lots of different motor options for you, lots of different cars and different price points.
And these were originally conceived as dual purpose street and race cars. Did most people use them primarily on track or what?
Most of them were basically used for road and race. Bill Devin had a manufacturer license with the state of California, so he could manufacture cars, put VINs on them and sell them. So, and you got to think back in the time you drove to the racetrack, you won your trophy, put it in the front seat and drove home. And that was the glory days of racing. And that's why I think you and I both love those times so much.
Well, I actually didn't realize that Ack Miller had a history in Devon's. You may get a kick out of the fact, Kevin, that I have my own Ack Miller connection in that I have the El Caballo de Hierro, the La Carrera road race car that he ran, and a rather primitive kind of junkyard racer type thing on a Ford T-body with American power, and definitely an impressive car to have raced in Mexico. I think he averaged 90 miles an hour over the course of 2 or 3 days. He was also, interestingly, one of the first people to use in-car camera back in the early 50s. So I'm digressing, but you really got my antenna up with the Ackmiller reference.
No, and those of you who are on Instagram, go to our Instagram or Facebook page. We actually have a video up of him making a run at and at Pikes Peak, and you feel it in your stomach when he's drifting around some turns, and like the other side of that turn isn't a guardrail or guide rail; it's a drop off. So yeah, he liked to go fast. He actually ran one at the Bonneville Salt Flats too. Devin.
Absolutely, yeah, very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we could spend another hour talking about going deep on Devin's history in the 50s and 60s, but I guess I'm curious to hear, what then became of Devin in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and kind of set up the how Devin came to be what it is today, and where you came into the fold.
Yeah, I'll start with in 1956, Bill Devin built two cars for the New York Auto Show. They were called Devin GTs. They were hardtop cars. He built one, made the show, one almost got completed in time, but did not. At that show, he got orders for like 300 of these cars. Um, at that time, he did not have the financial means to go into production to make these cars. So he kind of pulled back and they say he went out of business, but he kept all of his molds and jigs, which I have today, and I'll get to in a moment. But he kept them for years until he passed away in 2000. Now, in 2000, there were four Devon enthusiasts out in California, and it was like Dick Judas, Steve Young, Dr. Brickner. Mention their names because it should never be underestimated what these guys did to preserve the mark. They went to Bill Devin's widow and said, we'll take all this stuff. And it wasn't lost at that time. They put it in containers in 2000, brought it back to Glendale, California. And it basically sat in these containers until I purchased it in around 2018. It just sat in these containers. Sure, guys went through and picked parts out they needed here and there, but so that's where I come into play. And I started collecting Devon, started getting to know people in the business, and people reached out to me and back and forth. And then one day I got a call from a guy, and he said, "Hey, I had a rumor. I've heard one of the last owners of the Devon sports cars is taken ill, and he's not doing well, and they're looking to sell the stuff." So I was like, "Wow, that's interesting." So for the next 2 years, I emailed the son of one of the owners back and forth. We'd email at Christmas time. We just got the reputation or rapport going back and forth. And then one day I got an email and said, "Hey, I think I'm ready to sell." So I was out of Barrett Jackson one year. I pushed on to California after Barrett and got to look at all the stuff. We went through it. We agreed on a price. And then I arranged to fly out to California with my two sons. We loaded up our own containers and we shipped them back here to the east. And that's where I am today. So right now I have a facility over here in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, where we now have the patterns, the molds, the jigs. And when I mean patterns, I have these wood carvings of brake calipers, which I take out to the Amish people, and they put them in sand and they cast them like they used to do in the old days. And yeah, it's kind of really exciting. I'm still finding stuff every day. I didn't even know what it was.
And so tell the audience, what exactly are you building in the shop? Are you building full cars from scratch? What are they powered by, and kind of what does it look like to place an order for a Devon SS? Is that the only model you're offering? Give us some insight into that.
Well, at first when I first started and the word got out, I had a lot of orders for like fenders or a hood here and there. People got off racings. Now they had an option. Now I can go back and my front end got smashed in a race. I can buy another front end. The car was thought to just sitting there. So at first I was really supporting a lot of the community out there. Not to mention the people bought bodies and never completed their builds, but lost their hood, lost their doors, because they moved. So I've been doing a lot of support for the community, supplying parts and pieces to cars, allowing people to complete their build. The last part you mentioned is we're looking right now and we're building two test and development vehicles. One's going to be shipped over to the UK here shortly, where it's going to be run at Goodwood, and we're going to see how it does and how it would do. We're just not building a car here to look good. We're building a car in the spirit of Bill Devin. It's going to have a real DNA of racing. We're going to have all the tricks in it. It's going to have to be set up right and really set up very durable to run Goodwood and hopefully be successful. So, based on the success of these two cars we're building, we hope to make some continuation cars available to the public. And I get contacts all the time. How much does it cost? When can I get it? We're not quite there yet, but we should be there soon. Once we build these two cars, we'll know what it takes. So we can make the cars available to people with an engine, without an engine. I think our plan right now and our proof of concept says, like, maybe we'll give you rolling chassis, you put in your own drivetrain. Maybe you want to be period correct. Maybe you want a later model Chevy motor for more reliability. That seems where people differ, but the styling, the idea, the DNA of the car is all there. And I think that's what people want.
There has been this whole, I would say, this whole continuation car movement, which you touched on, which has in many cases been really embraced by OEMs and manufacturers. You think of the Aston Martin continuation series. Jaguar is doing a bit with it, and obviously stuff with Shelby American and the Cobras and the CSX continuation cars. Has that been an inspiration for you? Is that what are your? I think we'd love to. I don't think I've asked you. I'd love to hear about kind of your passion for cars and what speaks to you, Devin, obviously, but what was on your wall as a kid, and what did you lust after and drive way back when?
And it's funny, just talking to somebody from work here. And I'm like, Paul, I don't know why. I just love the lines of this car. It just looks great to me. And he goes, you grew up watching Speed Racer. What do you think you're gonna like? And he's right. I grew up. Those were the cars I saw in magazines. These 59s, these 60 cars. They were the ones I lusted after and saw. So that's where I think it came from. I've always been kind of a motorhead. I was the kind of guy who would take apart mom's car in the driveway and she'd come out to go to the groceries and I'd have the valve covers off or something. So always worked and wrenched on my own cars. I think like many of your listeners, everybody dreamed of having their own car company, or we all drew cars on piece of paper and said, this is what I'm going to design. Well, this is almost in my later years in life. I have a very successful company I run now that allows me the means to do this on the side. Yeah, I get to live out some of my childhood dreams in putting together and designing a car. Sure, I like to see what Aston Martin's doing with their continuation car. Jaguar has one, but there's a lot of private guy, Bizzarini, the yeah, Bizzarini is one that comes to mind. There's a couple guys who are doing it. But what's really exciting about Devon is we are actually working with the original frame table. We're working with the original molds, the original patterns. There's going to be a DNA in this car that's not. I looked at a drawing, I looked at a coffee table book, and I'm designing it now. This is the real components that are going into this car that were put in the 50s. So I think that's kind of exciting for people who want to build something that's authentic. It's not something that's a copy of something. These are going to be authentic parts and being used in authentic cars.
That's super impressive. You mentioned you're gonna bring one to Goodwood and run it. Tell us about that. Is that a car that's currently in production that you're scrambling to get ready for the fall? And what is that? That's not the Tourist Trophy race. Is that the Lavant Cup? What class is that going to slot into?
Um, well, the class is called the Lister class, since you mentioned Lister, and I don't know the official name of it, but Lister always wins the class, so they call it the Lister class. So a little bit about the car. I mentioned earlier in the show that they were manufactured frames in Ireland. These guys, Nolan Hillis and Malcolm McGregor, built these frames. Where there are 20 frames built, and there's a gentleman in England who has frame 19. I have frame 20 that were never bodied with cars. So he has frame 19, I have frame 20. So I'm providing the body, the rear end, a lot of the parts and components to complete frame 19. So it's going to be sitting on an original Malcolm McGregor, Nolan Hillis chassis, and it'll have an original recreated Devon body on it. So I'll have a lot of components. So these are the two cars we're building right now. So their authenticity is in that chassis and in the body and everything.
So I'd be curious to know, you mentioned Bill Devin passed away 20 odd years ago. And at the time, there was a number of original parts and a whole inventory of Devin related bodies and other such things that were transferred to the new owners that acquired Devin and all the property. Presumably that was kind of a fixed supply of original parts and other items. Is that inventory still available? I imagine a number of that stuff has been used to build cars, or you mentioned owners and racers have been needing parts and all sorts of stuff. You mentioned the cars you're building do have some original components and also some newly manufactured ones. So give us a sense of kind of talking about originality and that on that subject, what you're working with.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I still look back on it. It's almost like Bill had probably one of everything, and I think when he got down the inventory where he had one, he had some made. So it's very interesting to me that if it's something like a body or a hood, I have one of the originals. So if I go to remanufacture it, I can see how many layers of mat were put down, how he trimmed it, how he made it. So yeah, some of the original parts I try to keep and not put out there, but I keep them in my own inventory so I can use them as a pattern. So a lot of the parts I have, we had a lot of brake calipers, but I still go get them cast. He made his own manifold, so I had them cast. I'm very lucky being here in Pennsylvania. I seem to have a very good ability to have things made. The Amish will still do sand castings where they pour aluminum into sand molds and take them out. It's crazy when I go down there, and the guys just take my stuff, don't ask for any money or anything, and call me like 4 months later and said they're ready, and I go down and pick them up. So to answer your question, I'm remanufacturing a lot of parts, but I do have some original parts, but they're being remanufactured off the original patterns, and they're almost undetectable from an original one that I might have received when I purchased everything.
Yeah, very interesting. And you have been very active in a number of Devin listings we've had on BAT over the years. And I understand that you also provide some authentication expertise. Tell us, which I've seen on a number of listings that we've had. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there have been several people coming up and wanting to sell their car, so I can get involved. There's another gentleman who lives right by me, Craig Jones. He's another expert in the Devon community. Either Craig and I can look at that and provide a letter. Now, a couple of those letters have even found their way into your photo gallery on Bring a Trailer, and I think that'll give the customers, the end user, the person bidding on it, a little comfort level that somebody's looked at this. It's not a knockoff copy. This is an original Devon special 295 C or D, and it's up for sale. But yeah, we're more than willing to do that for the Devon community, and uh, hopefully people bidding on the cars have a better comfort level because they are unique. Let's put it that way.
So as we wrap up here, I think I'd love to know for people that are interested in learning more, if I want to buy one of your Devon SSs today, what's the process for that? Do you have orders? You mentioned the 2 prototypes that are currently in production. What does kind of the future plan look like for Devon sports cars?
Well, right now, like I said, we're building these test and development cars. We have made a couple bodies available to the right people who are in the spirit of what we want to do, continuing this build, who work with us to hopefully sort out these things. I don't want to sell something I can't support. If the thing needs doors on it, I want to make sure I know how the door hinges work and it all goes together. I think customer support, and whether it's my other business or this business, is very important. So we're sorting everything out, and that's probably a good word. How the hood went on, how the hood hinges worked. An average car has 10,000 pieces into it, according to Jay Leno. Bill Devins didn't, but I'll tell you, he has at least 5,000 individual little pieces that have to be sorted out, material lists put together. So we're still in the process of trying to put all this together, and we have taken on some channel partners, some other builders who are building a car, and they go at this eyes wide open. They provide us with a lot of feedback back, how these parts are fitting, how it's going together. So generally, you can't call me up. I'll give you a price right away, but if somebody wants to work with us as a channel partner and help sort this out by building their own build, we'll bring them on board. It's very exciting.
Fantastic. Well, I think everyone would agree. It's great to know there are people like you out there who are so passionate about this stuff that you're taking up the mantle on something like resurrecting a tried and true racing car heritage brand. So I think that's pretty neat. It's a small group that is taking it as far as you do, but I think I'm super excited to see what you make of Devin going forward.
Thank you. If your listeners want to find us, we're available on Devin Sports Cars LLC is our Facebook, Instagram, and actually website. So that's a good place to find us. I encourage your listeners to go and look at our Instagram, especially. We're putting stuff up, content all the time as we build more things, as we work through things. We have a YouTube channel, which we have how to put on a door, how to put the headlights into the car, as we're building a library of build videos that will go hand in hand once the cars are available.
Fantastic. There you have it. Kevin Callahan, we'll wrap it there. We'll be sure to link to the Devin website, and you can find Kevin in the comments section of future Devin listings on BAT, and he's very active.
Great. Thanks for having me on today, Howard, and look forward to hearing the podcast and listen to your other podcasts.